Hello?
Hello?
Hey, Kate, this call is being recorded.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I will instinctually just start typing as you're talking to kind of remember something, and I don't feel like doing that during these calls.
That's great. Actually, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm.
But I was saying that the grounding exercises were really valuable because it just, I would just sit and kind of just pay attention to the seat and to the floor. I do that a lot more when I'm walking right now or just like entering a space. There's just, it feels, I don't know how to name it, but it feels a lot better. It just feels a lot better. And I couldn't, it's sort of that I wouldn't know how to name it or place it, the first time I started regularly meditating. You sort of don't know. I didn't know exactly what felt better, but it felt better, and this feels a lot. So I do that now, just ritual, anytime I sit for meditation, and maybe like 3 or 4 times in the day I just find myself doing it, and it just really, it's not like earth-shattering or anything. It's not significant, but it's definitely different.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. And the difference, I think, the fact that it's different and that difference feels good and feels right in some way, even if it's not easy to pinpoint what that is significant. That's something that will support your mindfulness and your practice. If it's feeling really crummy or feels disconnected in some way, then then that's not going to be supportive. So that's really wonderful. I'm guessing it's because you're more embodied. To be embodied and to be present generally feels good. Not every moment of the day is going to feel good embodied, but or in certain circumstances or certain people, that's a little more challenging. But generally, that it feels good to be here, to be present.
Yeah, and I think I would sort of lean on, and I don't think this is an excuse to not do yoga, but I would sort of feel like an hour of yoga was that grounding practice every 2 or 3 days or whenever it was. And, with having a son, it's just gotten, that has been part of the challenge, is getting that in along with everything else. And so this has made me, again, like I said, I don't know that it does the same thing or whatever it might be, but it doesn't make me feel like I need that for that reason as much. Like it doesn't, I'm not sort of wanting, I do feel more just better without sort of trying to think about it too much. It definitely feels better. And it's sort of, I think there's an invitation for even being a bit more, just sitting sitting upright and being a bit more intentional about how I sit. I can't say that I did that as much as I would like, because I found myself turning to meditation at times when I was tired. But even then, even if I was lying down, I would sort of ground myself first. I would sort of feel the ground, and it's just, it's a great way to start.
Yeah. Good.
I can't remember what led to it. I think it was feeling a little bit, I don't remember what I said that invited you to share, because I don't even, that feeling is sort of behind me now. That's what invited me to ask to record this call, because I just, as soon as I thought of that, I went, let me look at my notes. What was I saying before that got me here? I didn't even remember. And I started diving into the computer, and I was like, no, I don't want to do this right now. But I can't remember if you remember. You don't have to, but I don't remember what I said that invited you to share this.
Yeah. My memory is that you were feeling ungrounded. That there was, and you shared a little bit of your wife's concerns
Yes, that's
related
right.
to that, and
concentration and so
and
yeah,
concentration, right? And I find that this grounding practice is easily overlooked in the overall instructions of practice, and often where most of us need to go back to and cultivate. It's very fundamental, but I think it's actually, for most people, very essential because we're not necessarily inclined to be embodied through our day. And although the phrase embodiment, I don't recall in any of the Buddhist teachings from the Buddha, from the suttas, him using that particular phrase. In the Satipatthana, which I think you mentioned, did we talk? Was that one
I
of the?
don't know. No.
No, maybe not. Okay, maybe it was someone else. But it's kind of the quintessential teaching, instructional teaching of the Buddha. There weren't that many really straightforward instructional teachings that were recorded anyway, and the very beginning, the instruction is to sit down find your posture and establish mindfulness. And that established mindfulness is thought to be get embodied, get in your body, feel your body sitting there before you move on to anything else. And I think that's a really important instruction that especially in an overall culture that is very kind of hectic and fragmented and busy, we need that kind of practice. And it's not what it's not the it's not all that you need to do, but it's not some ultimate practice, but it is a foundational piece that shouldn't be overlooked. So I'm glad that it's working for you right now. And I think going forward, I would just keep bringing that in. You know, it's not something you do and then let go of. It becomes kind of that first step to all of the practices. It's just, where's your body? How's it doing? Are you in it? Is your mind in your body? And starting from there. So.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'm curious if you're saying, maybe that sentiment is sort of understood. It's sort of an understood part of the Buddhist teachings, but maybe not as prominent in the way that we're talking about on this call. I'm just curious. I mean, it's not necessarily. I'm just curious, like, just how head heavy, the world is right now, how much information we're processing, and then, doubling that on my profession, just being a lawyer, which is just valued primarily for its thinking, and then me being on top of intersecting that with, what I know about myself to be sort of an Enneagram 6, which is also a head-heavy state. So it's just all like grounding for me goes a long way, and maybe that wasn't, thousands of years ago when people were a bit more embodied. They were walking and doing things, not just sort of as sedentary. I don't know. But it's definitely something that is invited more now, I think, or is welcome as a refreshing change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know what the human experience was that long ago. But my guess is most of us have a harder time just being in our bodies. We don't have ritual or practice or examples necessarily. And in the English language, we don't really talk much about being embodied.
Sounds weird saying it.
Yeah, right.
It's a weird
That's
word.
right. It's not really something that's part of, I mean, obviously it's in the English language, but it's not a valued concept necessarily. And then, of course, it really depends on background and just whatever traditions that people are coming from that will understand that in different ways or be more familiar with it, or there are just also people who are more inclined to be more in their body, and the instruction becomes more about bringing you more into the mind. But I haven't met that many of those people. I think because we've all been trained so heavily to value thinking and to value kind of that cognitive experience, that even those who might be more inclined for a more embodied awareness, it's like, you know, from early on, elementary school, maybe even before, you're taught to abandon that in some subtle way, or maybe not so subtle way. So just the way we've all been trained is different. So yeah, I don't know. And yeah, I imagine it's not just helpful for you. I think it is. It's something that just about everyone I've met, that I've talked about their practice with them, and we end up starting somewhere here with embodiment, grounding. You know, don't jump to the breath. Take your time to get to the breath. There's all this emphasis on the breath, or maybe sound, but I think that's that's step 2, maybe step 3. It's a little further out. You know, having an intention, really understanding what you're doing when you're practicing, having that felt through the body, that it actually becomes an embodied intention to be present, not just an intellectual idea of what you'd like to do through your day. It's something that's more felt than cognized. That's where you want to go with this ultimately. And the practice and insight and awakening, that is its practice, or that's its process. Is it starts with an intellectual understanding, which is important. You want to know, what is the roadmap here? Where am I in the system? But it can't stay there. It has to be brought more fully into how each of us are actually being, and that is much more of an embodied experience and an embodied knowing than a just intellectual knowing. And then from there, it goes back up to more of this intellectual knowing when you try to talk about it and explain it. So it goes back and forth a little bit. So that might be more information than you need right now, but maybe it's helpful. I don't know.
It is helpful. The thing that I'm taking away is how much I feel intention as a mental state rather than a physical state.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a big shift for me, to think about how intention is in the body, or being an intention. It's like it's like the whole process comes down to my heart. Like, I feel that when you say that, my heart glows. Like, my heart gets big, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that can come from down here. Like, intention can be here. I think about the intention, it's almost like filling my belly right now, and filling my thoracic, and rather than it's sort of just it's nice to hear. I don't know that I've ever heard that. And so that's where it's really refreshing.
But you know it. Like, if you're experiencing it as I'm saying it,
Yeah.
your body knows. The body knows it. It knows it just what that is. And it doesn't have to go through a whole intellectual process to work that out.
Yeah.
It's there, which is something that over time, hopefully you'll be able to really trust that knowing, that type of knowing, that it's not just about that intellectual knowing. It's not to say intellectual knowing is bad or wrong or less than, but it's just not the only.
Yeah.
And this other kind of knowing is really important to freeing our minds. At some point, we have to come out of that that thinking mind that is always trying to figure it out, and drop into something that just knows. There's a real confidence that lies there. It's an old knowing also, and you'll recognize it. You'll recognize it when you feel it, or when you're experiencing it. And the more and more that can be recognized, the stronger it gets. And that becomes a really important guide through this practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just feeling into it. It's just really nice, and it's, you know, I had this ritual of starting my day with an intention, sort of writing it down in a journal. It was just sort of what I felt like was a good purpose for that time. And rooting into that, like with the body, is a really nice ritual. Like remembering that these intentions are not just something, I think you said, it's not isolated to your mind. It's like, it doesn't have to stay there. Like it's just going to be something that you feel physically, and so it's just a nice sentiment. It's nice to think about that.
Nice. Great. Well, that that intention piece, which I don't think we talked about last time, that would be something to add to your practice. Bringing this real awareness around what is your intention for your sit, if you're sitting, what's your intention for your day, if there's a particular interaction you think you'll have, or activity that you know you'll be doing that day, whether it's a meeting, an important meeting, or presenting something, or even just something you're doing with your family, to get in the habit of bringing intention to it. How do you want to be during that time related to practice? Present, I want to really listen. I want to be not just conscious of how I'm doing through the presentation, but have some awareness of how it's being received. I want to be able to feel my body while I'm, doing this thing, or, whatever it is. I want I want to be patient with myself as I'm sitting here doing my meditation. It can be something very, very simple. Sometimes simple is better. You don't want to get too caught up in creating the perfect intention. But notice how it'll start as a thought. It'll be more of an intellectual exercise. But see what it's like to, when you have time, to bring it more into this more body knowing or somatic knowing of that intention. And you won't always be able to connect with that. Sometimes that'll feel kind of strange, or maybe even confusing. How am I supposed to feel that right now? Or I don't really feel that right now. Don't get hung up on that, but go through the motions of what is it like to experience that now more embodied, and see what happens. almost like you're inviting that possibility as opposed to forcing the experience to happen, because that won't work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It really does have to be more of an invitation, and in that invitation, something can incline towards that experience, and sometimes it won't. But it's more of this is a practice, so it doesn't need to be a certain way every time, and it won't be. It'll be different as you do this. But just to get in the habit of that and seeing the difference between the intellectual intention and the embodied intention, see how that works as you move through whatever the day, the meditation, the activity. See if that has any effect. Sometimes you'll notice it really does. And other times you'll notice, wow, I completely lost it the moment I walked through the door, or the moment I stood up. It's gone. And that, just noticing that, though, having that awareness of where intention comes and goes, its effect on your life, its an effect on your mind, and all the things that you do, that this is also important and will be part of this grounding practice. Intention practice is really a grounding practice. It brings us back into something that, I guess I want to say, it grounds us into more of our spiritual way of being in the world. It helps us integrate that more fully into all the things that we're doing. So again, this is another foundational practice that I think will be helpful. And so you can do that, and you can also do the grounding practice, feeling the feet on the ground when you're walking, feeling the body sitting there or laying there in your formal practice. In other ways that you're bringing it already is fantastic. But we don't want to go too fast from that. I'd like you to really take some more time with that before rushing into breath or sound, concentration, metta practice, all of these things. It's important to slow this all down and not feel like, okay, but let's get to the good stuff, which can be kind of, the type A, like, okay, but I want to get to the really significant things. The foundation, it's just like building a business. Without that foundation, it gets pretty crumbly at the top. At some point, it starts to waver. It doesn't have the strength. And so these foundational practices are really important. And then as we move you more into these other practices, you'll have that strength at your base. It'll be easier to move into these other practices. There'll be a different understanding as you approach them. Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't have a calling. I'm not called to what's next.
Good, great.
I'm really,
so helpful.
I'm called a little bit to what's missing right now, and I don't know if that's the right state, but it's like something doesn't feel right, and that's what I've been articulating to you, and I think that's what came of this. I mean, look, I left the keys in the door yesterday, so in terms of concentration, I'm okay staying right here. But whatever it is that you're offering is just fine. I think you said that when you mentioned my wife, I just started laughing. She left the country yesterday for a week, and of course, we arranged for pickup and drop off of my son to daycare while she's gone, just because it helps alleviate the load. And the guy came this morning, and he's like, "Your keys are in the door," and I'm just like, "Yeah. You're here to help me, and apparently I need it."
Yeah, good. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good.
The world hasn't changed in a month. I mean, some
No,
grounding practices
it
are really
doesn't.
valuable.
Yeah.
I got to stick with it. I appreciate the sentiment that these are. I cannot express enough my value for foundational practices. I mean, in yoga, just paying attention to where you're looking, breathing, feeling your muscles, feeling your feet on the ground, like really basic things, and just making those basic shifts in the practice. I did a yoga teacher training once where for the entire 45 minutes, whatever our practice was, that one session we did, I mean, it's a week-long training, but for one session they had a metronome counting the beats, and they had us breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 4 the entire time.
Oh, wow.
And I have never sweat that much in my life. Like just paying attention to the breath, like how much that affects you in that practice was fascinating. And so these foundational aspects of living or just being or even these practices I'm very okay with rooting into for a long time.
Good. Great. Okay. Any other questions about the practice piece right now? Because I know you wanted to talk also about a presentation is that right? Do I have?
Yeah, I mentioning that about the practice piece, I'm curious. My life does feel a little full, but if I was going to turn to reading anything between our calls, if you felt like there was something that was a nice, and I have other things that I already have, so I can even just kind of go back to other texts and books, and I can tell you some of the things I already have, but if that's of value, that's great, and if not, no problem, but I was like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would normally say I would probably normally have something to say yes to. Because these are I can't think of a book that would focus primarily on what we're talking about right now. I feel like they would quickly take you into other practices.
Yeah.
And I don't want to promote that yet.
That sounds just right. That's why I was not like asking for it, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Great.
But
it's like comfort with the practice.
Yeah, in the future there'll be plenty, but for now I think, let's keep it really direct to these foundational pieces.
And before we move on, I mean, I wanted to let you know that I'm having this feeling of being fast, of not being, I mean, I guess this is just very common with so many people, and for some reason that comforts me, but like, of not like, of just being like not where I am, of being fast right now. Like my mind is, I wouldn't say necessarily elsewhere, but there's a tension, like if my kid's around and my wife is around, and I don't feel like I'm just like, there's not that sigh of relief. There's like an onness, and I just, I want it, I know that it's not, I took a year off from work, and that was, it was so refreshing, and now I wouldn't say I'm longing for it, but I know the difference. Yeah. Like I know my wife comes down the stairs, she's the one who's working. I'm like, hey, dinner's ready, like I took care, like everything is settled, and I guess I just feel less settled, and so I just wanted to express that. And then the other thing that's coming up for me is on the intent, and I think this is related, on the intention piece, if I'm waking up and I'm going to put a journal on my desk and I'm going to start writing an intention every day again, because I remember how valuable that was during that year off. It really set me on an entirely different course. And there's something about like all of my intention, like I did this coach training and part of it they had us come up with a purpose and like, and it was really nice because it really got me going. Like as soon as I started writing that purpose down every morning, it like catapulted me down an entirely different direction. It's really powerful actually. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of space for my personal life in it. So it felt like my professional life was catapulting and I was handing my personal life a bit over to my wife to handle. You know, it was like, and I think it's in reaction to that year when I was off, like the personal life was really handed to me because she was working like mad and I was off, and so I was able to just be, you know, with our son. I can't remember if I mentioned this. For the first 2 months, I was primary care, and she was working. She didn't take maternity leave because we came into an adoption, and so it was like really to the full extent. I was like fully much more there on that side of the life, and so when I kind of turned back to work last year, I kind of went full throttle on work, and I feel it's nice. There's no complaint from my wife on this, on it's feeling gendered or it's feeling imbalanced or whatever it might be. But I don't. It's a long way of saying I'm not leading with the things that I know are most important to me, which are actually I don't feel it's not embodied that my family and my personal life is what's most important. I think my values in my head are a little bit out of line, and I think that's not. I think that's showing up in the world. Like if I was going to list out my intentions, the list would start with work and then go to personal, and I think that needs to flip with the faith that work will still work out. But it's just not like, I know this is making sense. I don't know if I'm hitting the nail on the head though, but like I don't feel like it's not all right. Like, and I think that because like I don't feel that feeling of lack or like I'm not there when I'm working. I feel that in the personal life, and I think it's just how I lead my entire, like I lead with work. I think I was trained from a very young age that work works and that work is like, it's work first and then family because that's how we survive. And I think I want to like unearth and reframe that, or at least start to just create, I don't need to flip it, but like logically, I do everything for well-being and for my family and for my son, but it feels very secondary when I'm with them. It doesn't feel primary. I think it's just, I think I'm leading that. I think I'm the root of that, or my intentions are the root of that.
Or it might be the intentions are there, but the intentions are coming out of some kind of maybe story or old belief system, as you touched upon there.
Like 1,000%.
Yeah, and then of course the intention when it's not, sometimes our intentions come forward and they're not fully conscious. You know, we're not conscious about where they're really coming from, what else is entangled in them. You know, is it for, you know, security, stability, well-being, connection, you know, whatever it is. What else is entangled in that, in these intentions? And it sounds a bit like there's a bit of that going on, but just you naming it, even if it's not quite maybe the full, maybe you're not naming the fullness of what is coming up here.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like it's percolating a little bit. Just having some awareness around that is the start of that. You know, to stay close with that as you go through these practices of setting intention and seeing how they play out. Instead of trying to make it some idealized something, maybe just stay close to what the intentions are that come forward, that that come up to your mind, what you want. Watch how they unfold, learn from them. Notice when there's that feeling of unsettledness connected with it, or that dissonance between what you would like to be valuing, but you see where you really are valuing. That rub, that friction, is really important. You don't have to understand it yet. You don't have to work it all out or perfect it in some way, but just to know when that's there is really important, because that's dukkha, that's suffering. And it might take a little time, because this is
Can you say again
right
what dukkha?
Oh, yeah.
Just saying it again. My mind went just slightly somewhere. I'm like, wait.
Yeah. So dukkha, you mean what is dukkha?
Not the definite, but you
word?
were saying like that you were pointing, you said something, you're like, and that's dukkha. What was it that you said right before that?
That friction.
Yeah.
That unsettled, kind of unsatisfied, this doesn't really feel in alignment with what my real truth is here.
Yeah.
When that shows itself, and it might show itself really subtly,
Yeah,
or it might be really in your face.
Pay attention to the subtle dukkha. That's what I was tapping into. Like dukkha to me is so significant.
Yeah.
Like it's like time to read Pema Chodron and all things are falling apart.
Right.
You know, like Jesus.
Right. But you are naming it in this, what you're just talking about. That kind of this isn't really it. This isn't satisfying, or this isn't in alignment with something that I know is actually really valuable and important to me. Or maybe that's not even clear. Maybe it just seems more like a should. Maybe this shouldn't be so valuable, and this should be more valuable. It's not clear yet, and so that's why you don't have to figure that part out, but do know that kind of rub with how things are and how the mind is working right now, there's dukkha there. And that's what I want you to notice, the subtleness of dukkha, or the subtlety, the subtle experience of dukkha showing up, related to your intention and to your values. This is really important, and I want to flag it, because it's pointing
really
to something.
Important.
Yeah,
I can feel it's like it's forcing me to slow down. I'm not slow enough to even notice this, and so it's like forcing me even on this call to kind of slow down.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I know that what's nice is that it's not a should. I don't feel like I should be doing more for my family. I want to have that presence again with my family. I mean, it's not like somewhere in my body, somewhere the values are family and time with, and how I am with my son and how I am with my wife and how I am on the weekend. Somewhere that is prioritized above work, and somewhere else work is prioritized above that. And that's where the tension is that in different places it's prioritized differently. And I want to sit with just understanding And I don't even like that I frame it that way, but it's just that it has been framed that way because of just how the world is. And so it's just kind of resettling into sort of this place where I can be at rest, or at, not at rest, but in a present, just have a certain presence to all of it. It's sort of that notion that, okay, the work is done today. You know, my wife's saying, okay, I need you to get your mind back in, you know, out of work and into this. And it's like, I don't need to hear that on my way into work. You know, once like 9 o'clock hits, I'm on and ready. And I don't sit here all day sort of my mind worrying about and wondering about family in a way that it's distracting me from the work. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening in the evening and the weekend that the opposite is not the case. Like the drive in my body is just being driven by work as a primary, but in my heart, it's like the things I'll remember more than anything in my life are the things that I value the most are some of my times with my wife and my son. And so, but it's not like I'm not showing up with that. And so it's not like it's not a should or it doesn't feel like I'm doing one thing out of obligation, but it's just like there's a way that I was built and it's slightly disaligned with how I want to be. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the dukkha comes up, I think. That's where that unsettled feeling comes up.
Yeah. I still am not hearing the clarity of why. You know, it's somewhat obvious on some level of why you would want to put value to your family. But I wonder if just asking that question, you know, why do you want that? Why do you want to shift this? Why is it valuable?
When I am yeah, no, this is great. When I'm present with my family and we're having those moments, like they're like the richest experiences in my life. Like they bring tears, you know. And it's like it's like I feel like it's Saturday afternoon when I finally get there because it just takes the unwinding Friday evening and stuff. Like it's Saturday, I can tell because there's a certain light to the room, and it's like brunch on Saturday when finally like everything is just like off and like the music's playing and we're just like he's laughing and he's getting this connection. My wife's like bringing her camera around because she wants to video whatever we're doing. And it's just like everything is happening in that light and in that space, and it just takes time to get there. And I think it's because the engine of work is, there's no question on the why for the work. It's like that's straightforward. It's security and success and upward mobility and all of these things that come with so much of my history. But the other thing for some reason doesn't. It's like, yeah, I can't name it right away, but I can feel it, why I just think that's like amazing.
Yeah.
But it takes me a minute to turn to that. Yeah.
Yep. So here's maybe part of the root of the difficulty of this is the work part is, you know, intellectually really easy why that's valuable.
It's very easy.
Right?
Very easy. Yeah.
The family part, it's not an intellectual exercise when trying to work out what is the value. It's a felt experience. It's a felt knowing. And if that is hard to tap into, or it's not routine to tap into that experience of value, then it's hard to build a strong intention around that. You know, the intention is going to come from the easiest place possible, the more intellectual value of work and stability and whatever else is there, success. So this is all very related. It makes total sense. This is coming in with this conversation to me. And again, okay, so your instructions for the month really are getting in the practice of setting intentions, seeing what it's like to invite that intention to be felt or known in a bodily way, in a more embodied way, to bring more of the embodiment grounding practices in, and then to notice this rub, this dukkha, subtle dukkha that comes in around intention and being present and grounded when going from work to home life. Not needing to get into a big, fixing, need to change everything right now kind of project with it, which I don't know if that will be hard or not, but for some there can be this inclination towards, okay, I see the problem, now I have to fix it. That will be your intellectual mind trying to fix a problem that it can't fix because it's part of the problem. So I want you to slow it down and really feel, what is it like to not be in alignment with this really important value of family and connection with them and presence with them. I want you to feel the dukkha. I don't want you to be drawn into some state of despair around it, but I do want you to be really present with it and know it, because it's from that actually the change will come. Getting into more of an intellectual, how do I fix this, will just bring in kind of a loop of confusion and maybe temporary fix, but not something that's more long-term. So getting to know that subtle dukkha experience related to value and intention between family and work life. So that's actually quite a bit. It's all related. It's all going to support itself. Each piece is going to support the other, and I'm excited for you. I think this is opening into something really important and timely.
Yeah, it feels that way. It just is, it's nice. It's nice because I know sort of there's a place deep within that's very comfortable with knowing that how this unfolds and what it leads to. And it's not like necessarily like getting attached to the fact that it'll happen, but there's just a lot of faith in just remembering, like, oh yeah, this paying attention here makes a difference, and then noting the intentions and how they come up makes a difference. Just like you said, just the awareness of it has a lot of value, and so it's just good to refresh.
So much of this practice is in the beginning and at different stages very, it's not necessarily intuitive. It's often counterintuitive. And what makes it counterintuitive is that the purpose of mindfulness is to become actually very intimate with the suffering, as well as to know when that suffering isn't there. And that's not what our minds necessarily want to do. we've been trained very heavily to stay away from discomfort and annoyance and hurt, to put distance there. And this practice of mindfulness is really us leaning in and saying, wow, what is this? And to fully be there with it in a way that's balanced. It's not meant to be punishing, but rather it actually becomes in its own way, if it's done in a healthy way, very nourishing, because we begin to understand and fully live a human experience that allows us to shape the way we respond to it or react to it. It shapes our understanding of why we are or why we're acting a certain way or saying certain things. Helps us understand other people. It helps us really be conscious of when actually everything's going really well and the dukkha's not there. To fully live in those moments and be deeply nourished by those moments instead of the mind tripping up trying to look for the next stressful thing that's on the horizon, or getting caught up in filling that space with overactive thinking or planning or whatever it is that we do. So this, what you're touching into, is particular to this part of your life experience and psyche, as far as work life and family life and intention, but it's also touching upon something much bigger. You're getting to practice with something here that is going to be relevant in many different places in your life and in your practice. So this is really, this is an important piece. I just want to really emphasize that. To this leaning into the dukkha is it's foundational, and it is something that takes you all the way to through this awakening process, and becomes more and more, it itself becomes part of the value system, really valuing that ability to be with that kind of discomfort. So take good care as you're doing this. Slowing it down really helps, however you can do that. You can be externally in going through the motions and busy and full schedule, and internally now and then just hit the pause button and check in, even if it's for a couple of breaths. What's going on here? How am I doing? What is my intention again? Where are my feet? Where is my body? And then moving forward. So yeah, I'm excited for you. I think this will be interesting how it unfolds, however it does.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. This is great. Thank you so much. This is perfect. Naturally and inevitably, these things help support, the work side and the things that are coming up. So it's fine that we don't touch that, but this is really valuable because I think it sort of affects and sort of spreads into everything anyway. So this is great.
Yeah, good.
I wanted to set the next call. It won't be maybe like 3 weeks from now, because it will be right before that next program, and I think it'd be really helpful to chat with you right before then.
Okay.
Because this is sort of now almost a month out, but it'll be about 3 weeks from now, and so maybe if it's okay to just calendar it right now.
Sure. What was the week? Let's see.
The event is like November 7th.
Okay.
And so then like that Monday or Tuesday morning.
Monday, Tuesday.
The 4th or the 5th, or even the Friday before, either way.
Tuesday morning would work the best.
So Tuesday the 5th at any particular time, is 9 okay or 9:30, like whatever?
I would say the earliest would have to be 9:15 because I've got my son up until that point.
Let's do 9:30 because I drop off my son. I kind of rush home to be here at 9, and 9:30 gives us both like a window.
Okay. Great. $9:30. All right.
Thank you so much, and I just sent the payment too.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Otherwise I might forget, so I just like to get it done at the same time.
That's great. It's so appreciated. I don't normally I get little emails that come through letting me know when people have offered Donna for these calls, so I don't always respond to it, and but just know that it's very appreciated and supportive, and yeah, and I'm looking forward to our next call.
Yep, likewise. Thank you so much, Kate. I will talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.